Well, good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Joe Biden's in London, so we have a guest with a British accent. Kay Smythe will join us. She's excellent. She'll have a lot to say as Biden violates all sort of protocols, kind of like his Treasury Secretary bowing over and over and over this weekend to a Chinese official. Really embarrassing. Thanks to the Biden administration for that nonstop litany of embarrassments. Colin Anderson will be with us at 4:30 from the Washington Free Beacon. We'll talk about Joe Biden's so-called energy-efficient military base. And then Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin is here at 5:30 tonight. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I hope you do today. I hope you had a weekend. I got to go out to the Nationals game over the weekend. I went on Saturday, and that was a good game. Brought my kid, and they hit a bunch of home runs, and then they had a rain delay for an hour and a half. So I went over to try and look at the World Series trophy, and there were a bunch of people sitting in front of it. They thought, no respect for anything. Nobody has any respect for anything. So I'm like trying to take a picture of the World Series trophy. I'm like, hey, there's a World Series trophy over here. And there's just a couple of people just sitting on their tushes right in front of it, relaxing. It was very stressful. But actually, it was a great time. Cool to see a couple of home runs. Went out, had dinner in the city. And it was nice. And we weren't shot. My family and I survived moving around through the city. That was good. I will say my feelings about D.C. have definitely changed over the course of the last decade. I used to be a lot more comfortable going into the city. Nowadays, I do think, I'm like, should we take the nicer car or not? Should we? Let's try and blend in more. I don't want to draw any attention to myself here. Let's drive into the city and see if we can have a good time without any crimes being committed. That would be good. And unfortunately, not everyone has that experience. Some people have crimes perpetuated upon them in the city. So that's what's happening in Washington, D.C. I want to get into some of the crazy stories that are happening today. We do have a report on Joe Biden that is being bandied about, that Biden is a nasty old man. That's the piece essentially from Axios, although they don't use that phrase. They say old yeller. That's what they call him. That's cheeky. Biden's private fury. Whatever happened to old yeller, by the way? That doesn't end well for the dog, if I remember correctly. Anyway, they call him old yeller, Biden's private fury. And in this Axios piece by Alex Thompson, they say that President Biden likes to whisper to make a point. Well, we know that. And it's always so creepy when he does that, all of the whispering. But they say in private, he's prone to yelling. Now, I realize there's a lot of people on the right today who are pointing to this as signs of Biden's obvious dementia. And I will agree with that. There is something to that storyline, that his senility and his age are definitely showing in this story where he's screaming at all of his aides. But I actually think something else is afoot here in whoever planted this story with Axios. I think that there's another goal in mind to this reporting. They say behind closed doors, Biden has such a quick trigger temper that some aides try to avoid meeting alone with him. Some take a colleague almost as a shield against a solo blast. The president's admonitions include, God dang it, I'm censoring here. How the bleep don't you know this? Don't bleeping bull bleep me and get the bleep out of here, according to current and former Biden aides who have witnessed and been on the receiving end of such outbursts. Axios continues. If you've ever looked at an Axios report, they always have these little section headers like, why it matters. And so here's the why it matters. The private eruptions paint a more complicated picture of Biden as a manager and president than his carefully cultivated image as a kindly Uncle Joe who loves aviator sunglasses and ice cream. By the way, how carefully cultivated is this image they're talking about? Does it come as a surprise to you that Joe Biden is screaming at people behind the scenes? No, it doesn't. He's so carefully cultivated. That's right, because when I think of Joe, I think of the guy in aviator sunglasses who loves ice cream. That's the only image I have in my head because it was very carefully cultivated. I don't think of the guy who trips upstairs, who trips downstairs, who trips on stages, who sniffs little girls, who breathes really weirdly into microphones, who tells nonsensical jokes, who says God save the Queen at the end of a speech event here in the United States of America that has nothing to do with British royalty and not in any way an acknowledgement of the current King of England, who he met with today. I don't think of the aviators and the ice cream. That's not the thought that jumps to mind, and I imagine it's not the thought that jumps to mind for you either. They say some Biden aides think the president would be better off occasionally displaying his temper in public as a way to assuage voter concerns that the 80-year-old president is disengaged and too old for office. And there it is. There it is. So what is the purpose of this story? The one I'm going to read some more of this, of Biden screaming at aides. He's got a temper. Now, again, the claim is, it seems to be, that, well, this is a sign of how out of control he is. He's emotionally incontinent behind the scenes. He's just freaking out at all of his staff members. But then you get to that paragraph where it says some Biden aides think the president would be better off displaying that temper in public. Oh, so that's what this story is about. This story is about how the 80-year-old Joe Biden is actually super competent behind the scenes. He's screaming because he cares. He's screaming because he's better than all of the people who work for him. He's screaming because he's demanding excellence. He's like an aggressive football coach. He's butting heads. You ever see a football coach do this? Where they don't have a helmet on, they butt heads with the player who does, because that is how tough they are. They're the toughest guy on the field, and they're not even in pads. That's the kind of guy Joe Biden is. He's just ripping people for not living up to the expectations of the American people. That's who Joe is. These private eruptions. Senior and low-level aides alike can be in Biden's line of fire, they say. No one is safe, said one administration official. Biden aides still talk about how angry he got at Jeff Zients, then the administration's COVID czar, in late 2021, when there was a shortage of testing kits as the Omicron variant spread. You see, remember that shortage? Remember the big screw-up of the Biden administration? It wasn't Biden's fault. Biden was chewing out everybody who was getting in the way of the American people testing for Omicron. The rage was temporary, they note. Zients is now Biden's chief of staff. A spokesperson for Zients told Axios, quote, I'm not going to speak to what internal convos may or may not have happened between Jeff and the president. The White House declined to comment. Chris Whipple, who has a hilarious name, is the author of The Fight of His Life inside Joe Biden's White House. And he says, quote, there's no question that the Biden temper is for real. It may not be as volcanic as Bill Clinton's, but it's definitely there, said Mr. Whipple. Whipple's book quotes former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki as saying, quote, I said to Biden multiple times, I'll know we have a really good, trusting relationship when you yell at me the first time. That's right. Jen Psaki loves being yelled at. That's the takeaway here. Whipple notes Psaki wouldn't have to wait too long. Biden's temper comes in the form of angry interrogations rather than erratic tantrums. Okay, again, what is this about? What is this about? Is this demented Uncle Joe? Or is this, he's like Arlie Ermy. He's just yelling in the barracks because he wants to form these young, dumpy men into full-blown United States Marines. It's Full Metal Jacket all the time at the White House. Biden is super competent. What do you think? You think Biden, they say these are angry interrogations. They're not erratic tantrums, angry interrogations. He's on top of it. Quote, he'll grill aides on topics until it's clear they don't know the answer to a question, a routine that some see as meticulous and others call stump the chump or stump the dummy. You see in this equation, the chump or the dummy is not Joe, it's everyone around him. They're all chumps and dummies. Nobody's as clear thinking as Joe Biden. Joe Biden has seen every angle. He knows every question to ask. He knows every single thing he needs in order to make the kinds of King Solomon-esque assessments he needs to each day in the White House. You didn't bring enough information. You weren't prepared for Joe Biden, that incisive questioner of chumps and dummies. Being yelled at by the president, the piece continues, has become an internal initiation ceremony in this White House, they'd say. If Biden doesn't yell at you, it could be a sign he doesn't respect you. Sounds Machiavellian. Ted Kaufman is Biden's longtime chief of staff when the future president represented Delaware in the Senate. He told Axios that Biden's process is policy-driven, has made him a strong executive. This is starting to sound like a Kim Jong-un piece, by the way. Biden will occasionally sacrifice members of Karine Jean-Pierre's family to send a point. Feed them to dogs. Yeah. What is happening here? Quote, this is from Ted Kaufman, the longtime Biden chief of staff. If there is something that's not in the brief, he's going to find it, said Kaufman. It's not to embarrass people. It's because he wants to get to the right decision. Most people who have worked for him like the fact that he challenges them and gets them to a better decision. Hey, who's right about this story right now? You know in your heart that I'm right about this story. And everybody's talking about this today. They're like, oh, Biden's so crazy. He's like screaming all the time. He's flying off the chain. The point of this piece is to suck up to Joe. The point of this piece is to make it seem like he's not an invalid, that he's not just floating around the White House, bumping into walls, and they have to follow him with, like spackle and paint. Oh, they put another dent in that wall. He's like, no, he's super competent. He just demands excellence of everyone around him. He doesn't want to be angry, but he has to be. It's the only way he's going to get the message through. Huh? So, people like the fact that he challenges them. He makes them better people. Some Biden aides argue that the president's rages reflect his high expectations for his staff. Quote, speaking Biden is a particular skill, they said. It can take years to learn to navigate his moodiness and anticipate what information he's going to ask for in a briefing. I love this. So you and I both know that the kinds of questions that you can't prepare for in a briefing from Joe Biden involve things that have nothing to do with the briefing. I'm sure that's what's really going on. Like, what is he going to ask? Like, how many balloons are in the White House right now? Like, what are you talking about, Mr. President? But they claim that he's just so on top of it that they have to be fully prepared to brief him. This probably, if that was the case, Karine Jean-Pierre would have been fired a long time ago. That woman is not ready for anything. What kind of press secretary would work for if this guy was actually with it and he was asking a full range of questions, making sure you're fully prepared? Wouldn't you have a press secretary that reflects that attitude? Of course you would. Karine has no idea what she's doing. You wouldn't have her in that position. Some administration officials, many of whom went to elite schools, what does that have to do with anything, struggle with Biden's demand to ditch wonky acronym-filled language and brief him as if they were talking to a close family member who isn't in the D.C. bubble. Put differently, Biden's too stupid to understand what his aides are saying, so they need to boil it down for him. Tell me like I'm 5. Biden's defenders acknowledge that he can be tough, but they also say he can be more generous and compassionate than many powerful politicians and can make them feel like family. All right, let's accept some of the things that they're asserting in this piece. 1, he screams all the time. He's constantly bullying his staff. He's treating them like crap. And simultaneously, he's generous and loving. This sounds like an abusive relationship, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Like he's trying to earn you back after he just smacked you? That's partly why so many aides have worked with Biden for decades and go in and out of his orbit, they say. Then they say, here's the big picture. The big picture, : Biden tries to conceal his temper in public, but occasionally has shown flashes of it, and some former aides have written about it. In January of 2022, he was caught on a hot mic calling Fox News' Peter Doocy a stupid son of a... He did say that. He did scream that at Peter Doocy. He was very angry. He's been angry for years, by the way. It's not just in his old age. This is 1987. Joe Biden got mad at someone who asked him where he went to law school.
I have one real quick question. What law school did you attend, and where did you place in that class? And the other question is, could you quickly, I think
I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect. I went to law school on a full academic scholarship.
That's the spirit. Treat voters like crap.
The only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. In the first year in law school, I decided I didn't want to be in law school and ended up in the bottom 2/3 of my class, and then decided I wanted to stay, went back to law school, and in fact ended up in the top half of my class.
Well, of course, that was also a lie. We've litigated this a lot. He barely made it through law school.
I won the international moot court competition. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only need 100.
He also went to a historically black college, he would later claim. This guy is all over the place. He's been lying for years. And this whole idea, this is also preposterous. But this Axios piece, whoever planted it with Axios, the point of it is to suggest a competence that no one can detect. It's to suggest that he has skills that you're concerned that he doesn't have. That you're thinking to yourself, boy, this is not a good place to be. Our planet is on the verge of nuclear war with Joe Biden at the top of the food chain in the United States of America. Perhaps we should do something different. And they say, no, you're missing it. You small-minded people, you have no idea what it means to be president of the United States, to be as incisive as him. Not even Pete Buttigieg, with his incredible mind, can reach the heights that Joe Biden is at. He's brilliant. Don't you question him anymore. And if he yells at you, it'll make you better.
FBI informant file refer you as the big guy President Biden. Why is that term continuously applied? Thanks, guys.
Why do you ask such a dumb question?
Why do you ask such a dumb question? There's Joe Biden in one of his many outbursts with the press. But that's competence, you see. That's what Axios is trying to convince us of today. Jeff is calling in from Hagerstown, line 2. Jeff, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Okay, so if Joe Biden is all that, then I guess maybe Hunter Biden is not the smartest man that Joe knows. Joe's the smartest man that Joe knows.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, Joe, that's a litlittle false humility on his part. He's making it seem like his kid's the smartest guy. But no, he's only number 2 to Joe. Joe is the man who's with it. Don't you can see it, right, Jeff, that Joe Biden is the smartest man in the White House?
Well, could you see it? Could you see it him standing there saying, yeah, that Joe Biden, this and that and the other thing? People think he's talking in the third person when he's actually talking about a guy that he knows to be Joe Biden. That's how lost this guy is.
Yeah, that's pretty lost, I would say. I could barely follow that. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the call. I have no idea who this Joe Biden is. I just found out about him being brilliant. I'll have to think about this some more. But yeah, that's the whole point of that piece. He's so competent. He just yells because he cares. That's right. Kim Jong-un coverage. Coming up, we'll be joined by Kay Smythe. She's got some thoughts on Joe Biden's trip to jolly old London town. That's ahead. Well, good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up from the Washington Free Beacon, Colin Anderson is here at 4:30. Joe Biden is on his climate alarmism world tour right now. And back home, he's got these energy-efficient military bases, which are, you'll be surprised to find out, not in any way energy efficient. Colin Anderson's got the updates. And then Senator Ron Johnson of the state of Wisconsin joins us coming up at 5:30. We'll talk about the latest in the investigation into the Biden crime family. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A couple weeks ago, Joe Biden announced this in the United States of America, apropos of literally nothing.
All right. God save the Queen, man.
And even that was wrong. They don't even have a queen anymore overseas. It's a king now. Maybe he was just doing some warm-up for his visit. He is in the United Kingdom today. He met with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, as well as the new king, King Charles, and they were hanging out. I did see British Twitter is very upset, though, because Joe Biden wouldn't take his hands off of the king. He kept touching him. He was just a lot of touching going on. People said, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, really? You're not allowed to do that? Might be the one thing he's done that I support is upset the rules of the British monarchy. Let's talk to Kay Smythe now. She's a news and commentary writer for the Daily Caller, and she joins us on the phone. Kay, good to talk to you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Just like another great example of my home country, I don't know, just being weird and embarrassing itself. I mean, I do think Biden's kind of doing the same thing, which kind of evens the playing field a little bit. But yeah, you're not allowed to touch the king, man. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah,
That's against the rules.
Is there anything for us, any lessons to learn here? I do see that people can't help but notice that these are two old, hapless white men just strolling around together. Are any specific lessons we should derive from this?
I just think, like, it's really interesting. I was chatting to your producer right before we came on, and I was sort of saying, like, we haven't really seen that much in the press about this visit. And I think just because it's so difficult to watch, and it makes both of our countries look so weak.
Yes.
Like the first thing that I saw this morning, which I wrote about for the Daily Caller, was Biden trying to talk to one of the king's guards, which is, again, like, I don't really know that much about the monarchy, and even I know that that's something you're not allowed to do.
Wait.
Like,
The King's Guard, if I have this correctly, these are the guys who with the red uniforms and the big black hats, the big woolly black hats. Is that who you're talking about? And they famously don't speak to anyone?
Oh, yeah, like they're allowed to speak, and like sometimes they'll like have a chat with the king, and I know that they used to, you know, have a chat or whatever with the queen, but no, it's like a whole thing. They're not even allowed to move to wipe sweat off their faces on 90-degree days, you know, the 3 of those we've had ever.
And so Biden was testing them. Biden was trying to figure out whether or not that was real, I guess.
Well, okay, yes, perfect spin. Like CNN and stuff, they could have at least said that, right? Because that would look clever. That would look kind of good for him. It sort of looks like, oh, you know, this is America making fun of Britain again. And, you know, who doesn't love that? But they just kind of like shuffled on and ignored it. And then I saw another video of basically King Charles, like, I don't know the way I described it at work was sort of like when you're trying to shuffle grandma along at the salad bar and like making sure that she's going to get everywhere that she needs to get, okay? And that's sort of like all I've really seen of this trip.
Easy on the croutons, grandma.
Oh gosh, I just don't know who it makes look worse though. Like it just makes both countries look so weak, in my opinion.
It is amazing. And then Biden and the new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, they got together and had the traditional British tea. They got together and they made special mugs for Joe Biden. Let's see if we can hear this audio. This is Joe Biden, Prime Minister Sunak, saying, "We made these special mugs for you, Joe."
Thank you, media. Joe, we've got these, thank you, cameras. Special mugs for you. Special new Downing. Thank you, media.
He says, "We've got these special mugs for you, new Downing Street mugs." And you hear Biden kind of say in a very tired voice, "Wow, new Downing Street mugs." So that's what our world leaders are doing. They're drinking tea.
They're drinking tea, sitting around doing nothing, not solving any problems, while all of the world's major evolving economies are slowly becoming the world's strongest economies. Like, that's what we're sitting here watching. They're watching us sort of drip into our greed and sort of like slide down the hill of our greed, where we're just so... like, we just feel untouchable, and it's kind of terrifying to think that with all of the crises going on in the world right now, both, you know, within each of our countries independently, but then on a sort of global scale, that this is what they're focused on. You know, like I saw the press paying more attention at Downing Street to the cat that lives there than to anything that was sort of going on that could really, truly influence world events.
Yes.
So, you know, it's just like, it's a lot of doom and gloom for a Monday, but at least we got some funny clips from it.
So they covered the cat. So who do you think's better at covering frivolous nonsense, the British press or the American press?
Well, I work with the American press, and I cover a lot of frivolous nonsense. It like really helps my mental health. You'd be amazed how many stories I can get out about Morgan Wallen and Yellowstone in a week.
Yeah.
Although I will say that Yellowstone has had a rather macro influence on the American psyche,
People
the economy.
watch that.
I could write a PhD about that.
I bet.
There's enough of a science in it. But no, it's... there's a lot of frivolous stuff in the UK. You know, this is the nation that brought you Love Island. I think, you know, American Idol was Pop Idol before it moved out here. You know, we're a nation that sort of used to really lead the way in terms of pop culture. Yeah. And so, we can give you as much trash as you want.
That's
if you want it, Britain's got it.
Yeah, you gave us The Office, too. That was nice of you. I mean, we basically straight up stole that, but still, that was really nice. Let me, with regards to, you know, powerful moneyed interests, I thought there was an interesting moment today. John Kerry obviously flew private to make his way over there, and he was with Joe Biden and King Charles and a group of so-called philanthropists and investors. In other words, people with either a lot of money or people who manage a lot of other people's money. And here's what he had to say about why it's so important that they all got together.
There's a full understanding here, particularly with the evidence of the last few weeks piling on, that when scientists are telling us that they are terrified by what they're seeing, and when we hear those same scientists telling us that we are in uncharted territory. This group has come together to try to figure out, okay, how do we deploy the funds necessary to invest to create the new clean energy economy. And I'm glad to say you recognize many of the people here at United States, and Mr. President, you've been with them before. They represent literally trillions of dollars either invested or assets under management or assets owned. And they are making decisions every single day about how to accelerate this transition.
You know, this might be the single most elitist clip we've ever played. And he's saying, look, all of you people are in the room because you either have trillions of dollars or you manage trillions of dollars. And it's so great. And we're going to change the entire global economy around this green energy push, which, of course, has destroyed human flourishing everywhere it's gone. So what do you make of this, Kay?
Dude, that is so disheartening. I'm sorry to sound so colloquial about it, but the first half of that speech, I was like, oh, no, I'm a scientist by trade. I just write by trade. But, you know, that's what my background's in. I'm terrified about the position that we're in as a world. Whoever wants to get together and solve it, I'm here for it, so long as it doesn't include, you know, like genocide and stuff. But no, we're going to focus on what this horrific manipulation of the climate crisis has become, which is just racked with hyperbole. At the same, I mean, it's no different to like the homeless industrial complex, any of these crises that these global elites actually make more money off than actually invest into any solutions of. And it's just, again, we sit here and for some reason, we just continue to acknowledge the propaganda as it's being fed to us. And at this point, Vince, I'm like, what are our choices here? Because if this is what our leaders are focused on, we either need like completely new leaders or we need a louder voice to say, actually, here are some of the real problems. Like, how is it that a movie that came out last week that focuses on, you know, child sex trafficking and the prevalence of that in the world right now, that isn't even a conversation I've seen a single politician try to have. And it's happening all over this country, all over the world. There are solutions that we can act on now. But no, let's focus on climate change, which we literally don't even understand as a science. Like, and honestly, it's just like move out of floodplains. Like, guys, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And we know how to destroy people's livelihoods. I mean, this is how many countries have to suffer under the weight of all of this? How many people need to die because of this decision making? How many brownouts and blackouts do we need? How much more pollution do we need to create in order to create the batteries for electric cars that are going to do nothing to change any of the so-called emissions problems? It's all just so preposterous. It's a giant scam. And at the front of it are people who look like Frankenstein's monster, John Kerry, telling a group of trillionaires that it's so great to be in the room with you as we reshape the global economy.
I mean, it's just terrifying. But, you know, I wrote a piece last year, Vince, that I think the headline was something, a host of cartoonish Bond villains are deciding your fate from the Swiss Alps. And I was just writing about Davos. And I'm just like, this is just what the world has become right now. This is why I'm so proud of the number of Americans who sort of sat back, see what's going on, not just, I guess, here in the States, but what's happening in terms of like, even just like the global supply chain, for example. And they're saying, you know what, I don't really trust that this is sustainable. I don't know for sure that this is going to be something that exists in the same way that it does now in, you know, 10, 15 years, maybe even 5 years time.
Yes.
And they're sort of going back to this far more, I wouldn't even call it subsistence living, but relearning skills that we had as a species for literally millennia that have been wiped out in less than a generation or 2 generations by these global elites and by the way that they have tried to reshape the face of our sociology. And it's so inspiring to know and see so many people sort of standing by and being like, you know what, if you guys are going to keep doing this stuff, we're just not going to trust you anymore. We're going to focus on what we can do for ourselves in our small community. And that's what I think everyone should be really doing right now. Like, it's taking stock of what's in your neighborhood, what's nearby, what can you do at home, and take care of yourself, because these guys ain't going to do anything.
Yes, preserving your liberty is a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing. It challenges you, and you should do that. That's a good idea. Hey, you mentioned this movie, by the way. I'm going to try and get to it later in the program as well, but Sound of Freedom, that stars Jim Caviezel. Have you seen this movie by any chance yet, Kay?
So no, but only because I literally haven't had a day to myself in like 6 weeks.
It's okay.
But I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've been reading about and writing about it, or not writing about it, but sort of reading about it to write about it in the run up to its release.
Yes.
And we have so many great reporters over at The Caller that cover what's going on in terms of attacks on children.
But at its core, it is a movie about a very real phenomenon, child sex trafficking, which is a scourge upon the earth, and any decent human being should want to confront it and end it. But there's I've noticed a number of media attacks against the film, as if the film is the product of some sort of conspiracy theory. They make it. It's almost they're running cover for child sex trafficking. CNN had coverage this weekend that was designed to attack the movie. I don't even know how you could do that. The Washington Post referred to it as a low-budget film about child sex trafficking and said that it almost topped the box office on July 4th, but its star, Jim Caviezel, has linked it to the QAnon movement. I'm sorry. What? So you are mad at people who don't like child sex trafficking? I'm not following here.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say this, and you've told me to say this in the past. I'll say it. I am not suicidal. I'm not suicidal. I need everyone to hear that. But to go even more deep down into this crazy conspiracy world, when you actually look at all of these different hit pieces out against the film, they all read exactly the same. It's almost like there was a memo sent to all of these different news outlets saying, this is what we want people to think of this film. Like, this is what we want people to focus on. We want anyone who doesn't have the time to go and see it to just put the word Sound of Freedom in the same box as like QAnon conspiracy and completely disregard it. Forget the fact that The Guardian actually wrote about the exact crisis in the exact same place back in 2018. Forget about, I don't know. It was eerie, Vince, reading through all of these different hit pieces and being like, this looks like it was all written by the same person. But it's Rolling Stone, Guardian, CNN.
Yes. How about fewer pieces about how Jim Caviezel's a bad person? How about more pieces about how Jeffrey Epstein's a bad person? How about more pieces about all of the people who are connected to him? How come we haven't gotten to the bottom of literally any of that? It's all, it's disgraceful is what it is, Kay.
Oh, it's absolutely disgraceful. It's disgusting. It's so embarrassing isn't the right word, because I think that is far too flippant. But again, this is not just a crisis that exists here in the United States. It exists in literally every country. There is nowhere where this is not happening. Yeah. But we have the resources here. I know people who go and rescue kids from these situations in foreign countries, and they are restricted on what they're even allowed to do here in the United States. And that in and of itself is a problem. I do not think a film, a well-made film, shedding light on this problem is really there's just got to be something wrong with you if you think that this is this movie is a bad thing. Like, there is something wrong with you.
Well, we also know the border is wide open, and that the cartels are exploiting it for this very thing, child sex trafficking. The Biden administration has been dumping our money into these nonprofit organizations who are helping ferry people into the United States. So any attention on this issue further exposes their own cruel failures. And this is, it's a big deal. And I'm glad you've got the proper perspective on it, of course. Kay Smythe, thank you very much from the Daily Caller. Great to talk to you, as always.
Thanks. Sorry, it's so doom and gloom today, Vince.
I have no idea what you said, but thank you very much. 352. Coming up on this, the Vince Coglianese Show, Colin Anderson's going to join us coming up in the next hour about these energy-efficient military bases that are not actually doing that. And Senator Ron Johnson is going to join us coming up at 5:30. You don't want to miss it. Also, I've got an update for you on the climate cult's next target. And my guess is you own at least 4 of these. That's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.